I'm Simon Boice. I'm from Lovehoney Group. Usually at this point, if I'm in a room of sort of 200-300 people, I'd ask the question, who here has heard of Lovehoney? I think it would be far too embarrassing to ask with such an intimate group. So I'm just going to assume not. But we are the sexual happiness company. We are the world's largest manufacturer and retailer of adult toys and sexy lingerie. And particularly what would be new, even if you knew Lovehoney of old, is the Lovehoney Group. So last year, the Lovehoney Group was formed, 3 companies coming together. So Lovehoney, from whence I came, Amarana, which is the leading adult retailer in Switzerland, the Wowtech Group, who are the leading manufacturer of adult toys globally. So by bringing together this sort of consumer retail division and the product design OEM manufacture division, what we've effectively done is created the largest adult brand on the planet, within which we've got any number of sub-brands, some of which you may know, I'm not going to ask the question. I mean, one of which you must know, right? And that's not too embarrassing to ask. And what this means is that we've actually created quite a complex ecosystem for our B2C operation. All of these have their own B2C retail arms. All of those do. We've then got Lovehoney's sub-brands of products, Wowtech sub-brands of products. We've now got 14 transactional sites, total global turnover of about 400 million euros, and we were operating on a very old school last click model until recently. So what I really wanted to try and do here was, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you why attribution matters. You've got some attribution super brains in the room here who would be far better placed to answer that. What I really wanted to do though is try and share my experience client side, brand side, about how to actually deliver a project of this magnitude. So how you take something that's been fact for 18 years and completely tip it on its head. When I was hired 3 years ago, I was given the wonderfully fluffy remit of, oh yeah, could you just come up with a better way to attribute our marketing spend? You know, dismissive comment that yeah, I'll be there in about 3 years. And my belief, and why I think this is relevant to this session today, whatever the future of e-commerce entails, especially progressive web apps, any other developments, new technologies that come on, underpinning all of that, very salient question in Tim's presentation, it's got to be the data behind that, the tracking, the attribution, the ability to work out what good looks like and whether what you're looking at is good. I don't think you should only look at that through a spend lens. I think there are so many ways that you could be attributing, so many goals that you could be measuring, not just spend efficiency, that I did something as a terrible career move, but I took that original, really simple scope and just blew it wide open. My gratitude to my leadership team for actually letting me run with it as far as I did. So really my aims in this presentation today, not going to convince you that attribution matters, I hope you all know that. But what I want to do is try and share how I took this kind of fluffy brief, firmed it up a little bit, share some of my experiences in how I managed to get bedded in, first as a concept, but then actually as an adopted business practice. And really just offer some of the kind of the very tangible, small, low-level do's and don'ts. And through the presentation, they're highlighted in the kind of the green and what was red. Really just try and bring out some of the, I guess, the advice if you were about to embark on an overhaul of your attribution model, what I would recommend you do or avoid. My name's Simon and I talk too much. We will be sharing these slides afterwards, I believe. And so I'm going to fly through. I'm here until 7 as well, so by all means ask me any questions. I didn't realise how much I'd learned until I tried to pull it all together for this presentation today. So just forgive me as I fly through a lot of them. But first and foremost, take that fluffy statement. You've got to state your problem clearly. What is it we're actually trying to achieve here? So we really need to start with a very clear list of what we don't have. So what you're going to get here throughout this presentation is I've now done so many presentations about attribution, the need for it, my preferred providers, how it's going, what it's doing, how it works. And I've just basically gone over my entire history of implementing Cubed for Lovehoney and just pulled out what I think are some of the key elements, the key communication points as we went through. And this slide here, this is one that I did right back at the very beginning, before we even went out for proposals, where I was seeking the board's approval to actually put it out there as a concept. I had to pull this together from that original brief, just sort out our marketing spend. what became apparent to me very early on was I spoke to anybody that would speak to me. So the first thing I would say about attribution is a lot of people in a retail business particularly, they don't get it. Or they think they get it and they maybe don't get what you're trying to do with it. Perhaps they have got an absolute sort of, they're totally married to the current system, they don't see any need to change it. So for me, the first most important thing, especially as a new entrant to a business, was to try and find those people that were just willing to open up. What are the problems, etc. Because it's not just that we're spending inefficiently. I mean, unsurprisingly, none of the marketing team were prepared to tell me that that was a problem we had. So really just going around the business, trying to find anybody that had a passion for data, for numbers, for attribution, just to tease it out from them. And from that alone, I was able to pull together this list of problems with our current incumbent. We work with Google Analytics, we still work with it now, we will continue to work with it. Cube becomes part of that suite. What we really needed to demonstrate is why it alone is no longer enough. And I think it's very important to assume with your current attribution model, it's not perfect. I can guarantee it is not perfect. You may not know the exact ways in which it is imperfect, but there will be legacy issues in there, there'll be labeling issues, there'll be misunderstandings, periods of outage, any number of things. And I think it's important as you're going through this to don't believe that everything is fine, there is no problem. I would go at it from completely the opposite direction. And once you've produced this list, once you've produced any list of things you want to do, prioritise it. I was very lucky that the list that I pulled together, I was able to find a partner that could help to a greater or lesser extent with every single element on there. If your business, your brand has different problems, get them into a priority order, solve the worst of them. It's the old Pareto principle, right? 80-20. And then make sure that when you go out to RFP, this is what you send out. This is what the guys from Yards received when I was looking for potential partners. And if as you're pulling this together, you know that this is going to be the basis for your RFP, I would urge you to remember those softer metrics. Things like the support that you're getting from your current provider. Things like the chemistry that you have with the people that you're currently working with. These things really do matter. I'm absolutely adamant that they matter. I think often when people are putting together lists of problems, they don't actually think to that how it's working, it's more the what it's doing. I was very lucky when I presented that. Everybody was like blown away by like one slide of 10 bullet points. Oh, so this is amazing. It's the first time anybody's actually stated the problem. And I was like, right, okay, well, I'm having that then. I'm just going to use this over and over and over again. If you've got something that lands well with that group, with the people that you need to influence, people you need to communicate with, just keep flying it, keep trying it out. So this slide, very similar to the last slide, this one was about 4 months later, where I effectively represented exactly the same thing, saying, well, actually, yeah, we no longer have trouble with Google. If we go with my preferred partner, please, then we can solve a lot of these. And the other thing I was acutely conscious of is that effectively what I'd done with that slide months ago is I'd given a giant list of problems to my bosses. It always seems prudent to me that if you're going to give a giant list of problems to your bosses, you probably need to start addressing them fairly soon. I kind of threw myself under the bus with that one. What you'll notice as well is that they are exactly the same. They're greyed out, but they are exactly the same problems that I had at the beginning. Now, the simple fact is, in this 4-month sort of intervening period, we found loads more problems. But I think the important thing is to resist the temptation to start creeping the scope right at the very beginning. To me, what I found is the awesome power of phase 2. Yes, you're absolutely right. We do need to fix that, but it's out of scope for this first phase. We'll put that into phase 2 for you. So really trying to gather all of those other problems. I've probably got the longest list of issues Lovehoney wants to solve of anybody in the business. Fortunately, I don't have to solve them all myself. And absolutely, to this point of if it lands well, fly it again, and again, and again, and again. What I really found is that because we showed consistent objectives for our attribution project all the way through, gave a real credibility to it. I think if we'd been constantly changing this, we were constantly moving the goalposts, people would start to question whether you're ever going to be able to score the damn goal. So certainly I think if you can actually stick to those core challenges at the early stage, it will absolutely serve you well. And then as it develops, so here this is in the same board deck, so this is where I've decided who I want to work with. I'm now asking if they will let me. What I tried to do here was to really pull out all of the things that those individuals I was presenting to had said. So all of these red sections here, these are things that senior members of the Lovehoney team had said are things they really want to solve. You know, we've really got to nail our SEO growth, got to get that back. I'm really not sure that historically we've been spending right. We really want a single customer view. Side note, who doesn't? And And so what I did is, I was very keen to be, I would urge you to draw from any strategy documents, any sessions, any conversations you've heard from the senior leaders, gather those sound bites, play them back to them. You know, you said this problem in this way, here's my solution to that problem phrased the same. At every opportunity, especially having started with a giant list of problems, I just took the opportunity to just start seeding a little bit more information, a little bit more about the how-tos, what it's going to do. So kind of the right-hand side of this slide was really just trying to introduce some of the concepts, soft launch it, if you like, to the business. And then a first example of what not to do is a slide that looks like that. I'm conscious that not only did I do a slide that looks like that, I've now totally just presented it again to another group. But do try to visualise if you can. Our senior leadership team are incredibly clever people, but they still will not sit there and read even one page that's only words. I think it's important though, as well as that, own the things that it can't do. So once you've actually stated the problems, you've got your solution out, you've managed everybody's expectations, you've got that in principle agreement, I think it's important to say what this isn't going to solve. Now this, just not least because of some of the people in the room, is no reflection on the cubed tool. What we actually found is as we were going through this, people were asking me all kinds of other problems. Oh well, brilliant, does this mean we can suddenly track ATL? Well no, you still can't click through from a TV ad, there's no tool that's going to help you with that. Oh, does this mean we'll be able to actually use our customer segmentation better? Not in itself and out of the box, but it will. And so I think it's important during all of this, throughout the process, like, no, that's not in the scope of this project, but absolutely, we'll factor it in, we'll do what we can to help. To me, there's this sort of old adage, the art of improvisation is to say, you know, yes and. Well, I would say the art of persuading people to give you what you want is to say no but. It's always got to be that qualified negative. Yeah, no, it's not going to do any of these things, but it's definitely going to help. And usually phrased in a different way. I've done this as a safe for work presentation. The old negative sandwich. I guarantee when you look at the potential for attribution, you'll have a far longer list of things it delivers you than the list of things it doesn't. Just stealth this in the middle of your deck. So I'm going to get fancy now. So the French social philosopher Lepage came out with this quote. I was talking, I was learning English language. We speak the language of the group with which we wish to identify. Effectively, the best communicators are those that adapt their style, that talk a different language to the different audiences. Having done these attribution projects 4 times now, and most recently at Lovehoney, I cannot stress enough how much I agree with that. It's really important to start putting your attribution in the context of the wider business units. So here I've got 2 slides. The left-hand side was one that I ripped shamelessly from the annual strategy deck of my customer insights colleagues. Right-hand side, I ripped shamelessly from the business intelligence team. When I ripped them, that wasn't in there, and that middle section wasn't in there. What I really wanted to do was try and present attribution as the glue that was binding a lot of these other projects together. So what I did is I very carefully re-presented the same slides, same colourways, same formats, just with a little sneaky addition of my project to it. I think what it meant then is you can really position it as a logical extension of things that are already in flight. This isn't going to replace all of the work. It doesn't render everything we've done so far defunct. And I will say that I learnt this the hard way. Do try to avoid implying along the way that there's anything actually wrong with these things. That yeah, if we didn't do my bit in the middle, this would still be valuable. I did find that I accidentally slagged off a few of my colleagues, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have helped in any way, shape or form. And similarly, if you're trying to relate it to the business projects, relate it to the business visuals, the things that people see, the things that people know. So these are, we have an initiative at Lovehoney called Lunch and Learn. So every few weeks, a member of the team will try to present to anybody that cares to listen a complex topic or a new topic, just something that could be interesting while you're eating your sandwiches. And I've done 2 Lunch and Learns now for the business on attribution. I did one before the project started, this is what I'm planning to embark upon, and one since the project has landed, saying, right, this is where we're at and how cool it is. And in both of them, through all of them, these are the pre-launch ones, really tried to make sure that we were using our visual examples. So, there's an excerpt from our TV ad, there's the photo of our pop-up shop that we had, actual articles on site. And going back to my point about constantly repeating those same messages, recycling those same visuals, I would recommend you to make sure that anytime you re-present it, just replace the screenshots with the latest ones from the site. If what they're looking at on the slide there is what they would see on site whilst they're, let's be honest, browsing their phones, looking at the website in your presentation, Really does help to make it seem relevant, modern, up to date. I very deliberately named other teams and individuals in mine as well. So called out brand marketing team, Helen, Elaine, there's my team there, my boss as well. It really helps with a complex project that touches so many touch points to really try and personalise it. So in the context of real people doing real valuable work. And actually along the way, what you'll find, particularly with attribution, is you're touching on a number of complex concepts. Take the opportunity every step of the way to explain all of those as well. So for me, for example, we were trying to explain the marketing funnel, and everybody can draw it as a funnel. What we really wanted to try and explain was why Cubed was going to help us to sort of move our focus to a more holistic sort of spread across the touch points, because we've got a mix of push channels and pull channels. We've got a mix of brand driving channels, sales driving channels. It's really just trying to help people get that context. It meant when I started to go on to the more complex aspects of attribution, how the model works, how propensity works, that actually they had that basic foundational knowledge. So here we've got my pre and my post. So effectively the same slide. You can see that I learned some mad PowerPoint skills in the intervening months. What I wanted to do is to demonstrate ROI. No one's going to sign off on or sign up to something that they don't feel they understand. So I think really building that foundational understanding is key. If you can visualise that wherever you can, and this is where it comes back to that resonant frequency. I am now widely known around Lovehoney as the sausage machine guy because of these. I'm okay with that, or I wasn't okay with that, until actually I was in the office a couple of weeks ago and I heard somebody utterly unrelated to me just in the background saying, "Look, you know this, our customers are not sausages, you've got to do it better." Right, that's it, we've made it. The sausage machine has landed. And so I think really trying to help people understand, things like how ROI is calculated, why this matters, etc., is something that I would urge everybody to consider. And of course, once you've settled on a specific model, in our case, Cubed, really take time to explain how that works. And because I've taken the time to explain ROI and attribution and the general concept, made it easier for me to do this. This is an interesting before and after. This is sort of pre-launch. These are the guys that I'm planning to work with. Post-launch, these are the guys we are working with. And what I found is that when I presented it earlier, it baffled a lot of people and it upset the social team because they became the example of negative propensity. But actually, what I found as I was presenting it more and more is what people really wanted to understand is, look, I'm happy in my old world, my last click world, I get it. How does this relate to that? So actually turned it much more into a step process about how we're going to move from the old world to the new. And yeah, just picking up on that social one, do be careful in explaining positive, negative propensities. All of this is made up data, this is a hypothetical order, but actually the lesson I learned, having slagged off a channel that I don't manage, you'll notice by the time I was representing it, it became a channel that I do manage, just for the sake of political ease. But I think what this slide really did for us was really help people to understand, look, old world, PPC brand was getting 250 quid credit based on all of this. I'm not going to explain propensity, there's better people for that here. But in the new model, PPC brand's only getting 60 quid, and hey look, these guys are getting some too. Really helped people to understand the tangible difference it was going to make to their channels. And further to that, I would say that the old world, new world is a maturity curve. I think that, again, you can see that I styled out a bit better as the months went by. But really, I think it's important to present this as a curve and be absolutely open about where you are now. When I started on this project, I believed that we were at what I was at the time classing as the absolute Billy Basic worst option there is. And where we were going to is the absolute top end. We're going to skip all of that in the middle and go all the way to endpoint. It's okay to say we're shit, but we're going to be better. Oh, I was so close to safe for work all the way through. And I think the other point to note as well, don't be afraid to correct yourself. I honestly believed for the first 3 months of the attribution project that we were running on a last click attribution model. Every single person in the business believed that we were running on a last click attribution model. It was only when we connected Cubed and compared Cubed last click with GA last click, it's something funny going on here, and actually it became apparent that what we were running in GA was the last non-direct, unpaid, preferred click attribution. So right, okay, so when we came to represent this, I was like, all right, we're not right at the bottom, we're one off it. But I think, you know, it's okay to learn things as you go along, to share those learnings. Definitely don't try and hide it. And then finally, I would say, if you've got company values, I hope most of your companies do, you should try to relate your project to them, attribution or otherwise. So these are Lovehoney's group values. This whole slide is one that I ripped out of the chief exec's presentation when he joined the business on merger. And then on the next one, I took that slide and just shamelessly cubed it up. And I just went through value by value. So all I've done here is take a screen grab from my PowerPoint, included the comments that I verbalised, and just said, yeah, look, ticks that one by this, ticks that one by this. Again, really help people to understand that this project can help to sort of help people live those values. But it's not just what you do, it's who you get to do it. And I've learned a lot about the wrong people to get to help you with your project. What I'm going to tell you now is what I think is the right people to get to help you with your attribution project. I think it's important to get a good balance of the planning and the doing. And what I've found is that actually a very few doers can coordinate an awful lot of thinkers. So we created what we call a sort of a ripple model. So at the very heart, you know, the stone that's dropped in is the project delivery team. So that's me and one of my team in support, a couple of the data leads and one of their team in support. It's really just 5 of us that are overhauling the attribution modelling for €400 million, 14 domain company. But we can't do it alone. So the next ripple out is our steering committee. So this is where we bring the chiefs in. We really don't want them involved in the day-to-day programming, the building of the reports, any of that. But it's very important that they have that opportunity to consult, to steer, to nudge, to redirect the project. Next ripple out, and I would absolutely urge everyone to consider this, is a smaller group of trusted and discreet colleagues. Discretion's a word we use a lot at Lovehoney, not usually in this context. You're going to find all kinds of problems as you're trying to overhaul your attribution model. All of those legacy issues, all of those weird data challenges. Some of them are actually pretty embarrassing. We found some things that were duplicating because people had spelled Lovehoney wrong in the tagging. You think, we're a marketing team, we really should be able to do better than this. So my advice is absolutely keep it contained, keep a lid on it until you've corrected all of those things. And it's important that you do correct them, don't just keep a lid on it. And then throughout all of this, nominate that kind of storyteller in chief, the project evangelist. It won't surprise you to learn that I'm ours. But it's basically just someone gobby enough to go through all of these ripples, communicate where it's at, what it's doing, what it's finding, what it's not finding, where it's going right and wrong. Just having that single point of contact I've found within the businesses I've tried to do attribution overhauls in has really helped. Everybody knows one person they can go to for questions, comments, suggestions about it. But this is where I think a lot of businesses differ to me. I think that once you've solved your attribution, you've got the most valid data you can, presented in the best way you can, you should surface it to as many people as you can. So at the moment, when we first started this project, it was working on the Lovehoney domains. So all of it at the moment is geared towards getting the 9 Lovehoney sites to a full model attribution, which we will then share to the full cohort of 300 Lovehoney specific individuals. Since then, we've merged with WowTech. We are going to be implementing the same tool on the WowTech sites, so I would actually turn that now into the 880 people. There is no reason to hide this data. It's all anonymised. It can all be ambiguated in different views if you want it to be. But you know, if you can hide your data from people, you may as well not bother in the first place. And what I found is some of the most valuable feedback I've had has come from the 2 teams or 3 teams that you might think wouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, they said, no, hang on a minute, that doesn't make sense to me as a total outsider because, technical term. And that project team, their real sort of the heart of what they're about is delivering that proof of concept. So what we did is we came up with a series, I don't know, 50, 60 potential tests we could do once we had cubes connected. And for every single one of them, we create a short test proposal deck. What that means is that project team can create that, they can design the test, they don't have too many cooks spoiling that broth. Then you can take that to that steering committee, the next ripple out for approval. And in all of these, explain the tool, explain the test, clear objectives and success measures. You'd be amazed how many projects start with no clear definition of what the end looks like. You know, if you're effectively asking people to look, trust this tool because I say so, that's no faith at all. And throughout these, I would urge you to be transparent with ongoing performance reporting. don't put the reports out too early. You've got to give it long enough to become statistically significant. But actually, if it looks awful, say that it's awful. The chances are you've got dozens of other tests in the wings. So actually, just adopt this fail fast mentality. If something looks like it's rubbish, stand it down, stand the next one up. And I think by having that, by not attaching yourself to any test in such a way that you're kind of committed for weeks and months until it ends, you can really keep it a lot more agile. I must admit, I learned this later in the process. I'm a lot more agile with the project now than I was this time last year. And then with those proofs of concept, I think it's really important to me that never ever let a test conclude without analysis and communication. The analysis, I think everybody does. There's usually a test manager, somebody that's driving that test that would look at it, but share that information. So what you've got here is just 4 random extracts from various test conclusion decks that we've been sort of sending out, really trying to tell the story. What did the new system do versus the old system? What does that mean in financial terms? And you'll forgive me having ambiguated some of it. What I will say, for the benefit of anybody that's considering a new attribution model, that was bloody brilliant. In every one of these, every time you communicate it, intermediate reports, end reports, restate the test objectives, because it's the same principle as the beginning. If you've got clear, consistent objectives, your credibility goes up. Restate the success measures. Why am I showing you this data? Because that's the data I said it would be based on. And absolutely be honest. If it looks rubbish, be honest about it. I've got a principle within my team that, look, as long as we've learned something, it's been at least partly worthwhile. And I think if you can have that, celebrate those failures as much as your successes, you can bang out endless, well, you don't want to bang out endless proofs of concept, do you? That rather defeats the purpose. But you can bang out a huge number of proofs of concept, different things, different ways of working. You can get it to that approval stage that much quicker. And then once you've got it to the approval stage, you've built this into the system, you've got your new amazing model. It's really important then to really produce those outputs frequently, reliably, consistently. Now, this here is totally ambiguated because there are actual numbers in here, so I'm not going to tell you what date range, what period, what filters are applied to it. Forgive me for that. But basically, what we wanted to do is try and find a way that we could establish a cadence within the business where people actually looked at this. And then not that they just looked at it, but they actually used it. So, for example, in a retail business, Monday mornings are usually where it's all at. It's where everything's happening, all your reporting, everything's happening, so you have your trading meetings, etc. So we thought, brilliant, we need this done by 10 a.m. on a Monday. Absolutely not. 10 a.m. on a Monday, everybody's doing all their old world reporting, they're pulling it all together, they're doing the commentary for the presentations, they're fielding the controversial calls with the bosses and the agencies. So we now produce all of our attribution reporting on a Tuesday morning. Get that retail Monday out of the way. And what we found is that on a Tuesday, 80% more logins to the report and about 50% more time spent in it when they got there than when we were surfacing it on a Monday. And the whole point of this specific view that Lovehoney created is to line up the old world, last click, with the new world, full model, and stare the differences right in the face. Do not be afraid to do that. If you're going to bring a business towards a completely new attribution model, they've got to understand how it relates to the old one. Or as the case may be, there's nobody from Google here, right? What was wrong with the old one? And so for us, this report has become really key for us in terms of that communication aspect of how people understand it, adopt it, and use it. I think it's important as well in terms of this sort of making the intangible tangible. Ask questions that your colleagues would recognise. So this one, hot off the presses, of now starting to move our project into phase 2, where we feel like channel attribution. We're very happy with where we're at. It will always be iterating it. We're now going to start sinking our teeth into the content reporting. So aside from the obvious duplicated content, before anybody feels the need to point it out, this was a slide that I pulled together for my content team, demonstrating why I need one. Really just to say, look, I'm about to start getting up in your grill, trying to do reporting on the things that matter to you. These are the sorts of things that I'm going after for you. And what I've tried to do is try and phrase it using all of the terms that I know that team use. When I did one of these for the channel teams, it was in very commercial, quantified language. If I were doing this for the customer-facing team, it'd be much more the emotive customer impact language. Again, think Lepage, adapt that language as you're going through. has always been to try and get to a report that is interleaving channels with the on-site content. So how can we start to understand the total contribution of all of the touch points in a journey, not just the marketing ones? So really the first example of trying to take that original brief of get our spend more efficient to really try and get it to a much deeper understanding of the customers. All I would say is if you are going to start throwing things like this out there, these future dream scenarios, for God's sake, don't commit yourself to a timeline. Just do it in a non-binding way. You've got to be transparent through all of this. If you've ever said black box as being a problem you've got, then you've stitched yourself up. You have no choice now but to be transparent. And this was something, one of the reasons I chose Cubed as the partner we did. It was core to us. It was right up there at the very first slide of the problem statement. And what I've tried to do as we've gone along is make sure everybody understands what goals have we configured in the system. What are the factors that the system is using to rank it by propensity? What are the patterns we're creating? What are the rules we're doing? And with every one of these decks, I've tried to link out to the most comprehensive source of this data that I have. Just want everybody to be able to see everything. I want them to be able to challenge how it's working. I have to equip them with as much information as the project group have to be able to make those challenges valuable. So I think the key piece of advice I would give you is do not replace your black box with just a really dark grey one. I'm trying to get into the lexicon this concept of a clear box solution. That's what I'm trying to deliver through this. We're as transparent as we can possibly be. And I think where it's particularly offensive is knowing that information like this can be made available makes it particularly galling when people find it hasn't been shared to them. And then just to the last point, I think I would say that this is a never-ending project. The analogy used to be the painting of the Forth Bridge, and then they invented a paint that lasts for longer, so it doesn't work anymore. But I think it's important to think that this is more than just channel attribution, and this is more than just solving today's problems right now. Brings us back to the theme of today, that future of e-commerce. And so this was an extract from the board update I did just a couple of weeks ago, as we're starting to embark on phase 2. This slide I presented right back at the beginning as to how I intend the project to go. I've now dusted it off a couple of years later, actually, from the original RFP kicking off, and said, right, we're here now. So, yeah, we've done the blue one, we're into the orange one. Phase 2 is going to comprise this. I think it's important through all of this, though, that managing expectations. Don't make promises that you or your project team can't keep to. I very deliberately called these phase 1, 2, 3 and 4, not month 1, 2, 3 and 4, Q1, 2, 3 and 4, not even year 1, 2, 3 and 4. A lot will change in your business as you're developing this. You'll have to react, you'll have to change the way that it's working as you go. But I think as long as you've got a clear destination in mind, people are likely to come on the journey with you. I've aligned these priorities to what I know the business priorities are. We're about to move into a period of accelerated content. We're growing the resource in that area. Something like, okay, this seems perfect then, doesn't it? We're bringing more people in to do more of that. Let's get a better measure of the value of it. And another don't do that I've learned from personal experience, don't put any new initiatives on the timeline slide once you've done it. I got accused of trying to stealth a pet project into this when I did that. So I think what we've established is that, okay, once the board have signed off on these 4-step plans, everything else we're doing now, we're putting into that kind of test, learn, reiterate, communicate cycle. It's almost like a change request process that we've gone into. So summarising, I've no idea how I did for time because the time is still running from Tim. I didn't know where I started. But state your problems clearly. Speak in the language that your business is going to recognise. Get the right people working on the right things. Try and make those complex concepts understandable, establish that cadence, be brave about old versus new, and never stop. Just keep going, have that next step in mind, always be moving on to the next phase. I do know what phase 5 is going to be, but I haven't communicated it to anyone. And I'm sure by the time I'm communicating phase 5, I'm going to have phase 6 in mind. It's an exciting, never-ending project. You might be able to tell from my enthusiasm. It's one that I'm particularly passionate about. Have I got time for questions? No. Results.
I'm sure we have one on this one.
I got a quick question. This is all really interesting for me because we're doing the proof of concept of
Yep.
Cube as we're speaking, we're putting the code in, and the bit you mentioned, two which you mentioned, one about how you deliver it to the wider business, i.e. we're going to be coming in and saying what you're doing right now isn't fully correct, to be political about it.
Yep.
You need to do it this way. How did you get around that? And my other question is picking the right. I like the idea of picking the team. So far, I've been kind of solely pushing it through because we're still fairly early stages.
I recognise that. That was me for the early days. Yeah.
How did you then get to decide? Because I got a few different people in mind across the business. As soon as you started talking about it, I was like, oh, this can. How did you bring that together? So like a data science in mind, I've got a marketeer in mind, I've got a data architect in mind.
Yeah. So the initial is kind of it's an exponential curve. This project. It's so much harder to get it off the ground when you're the one-man band than it is to get it from the 5 to the 9 to the 30 to the 300 people. But what I found is that actually having that clear problem statement, what I then did is every opportunity. I basically, until I was known as the sausage machine guy, I was known as the guy for whom Cubed is the solution to bloody everything. So in any meeting that I was in, I was like, oh yeah, we can totally pick that up in the attribution project. So, oh yeah, it'd be really interesting to get a full model view of that when we can. I honestly think, I wish I had a better answer than this, attrition was the key. I just hammered it so many times in so many different forums to so many different people that when it actually came to that board presentation where I actually got my time on the agenda for the board, they'd heard about it so much that this was really just presenting it then as the fait accompli. You know, I must have told you a million times that this is the solution to everything. So why the hell wouldn't you rubber stamp it? You know, which is maybe a slightly cavalier attitude to board management. I'm not. That might need to go in red box on my presentation. But then once you've got the board to sign off on it, then that sort of effectively makes it an official business project. And it depends on your business structure. So that might just be your senior decision maker, your chief exec and founder, depending on the structure. But once you've got the okay from that senior most level to yeah, go on then, do me a proof of concept, then they kind of have to support the land grab from the other business units. And I think the key that I found is in the early days, try and keep the involvement of those other people or keep the time sink for those other people to a minimum. So for the first 12 months of this project, I was probably doing 85–90% of it, you know, pulling everything together, coordinating it all, planning it all. But just when it got beyond my capability, which didn't take long, I'll be honest, I'm not technical. That was the point that I started to bring in those experts. So it was really a question of, right, look, can you help me solve this particularly technical problem? I will then write it up, present it, sort of feed it back. And then the board kind of gave me the permission, if you like, to tap some of this resource. It was very much a side hustle for us for a long time. But then what you'll find, there will be some sort of material change that happens in your business. For us, there's been 3 that have really ramped this up. First of all, the pandemic, and Lovehoney sales went through the roof, as you might expect, during a lockdown. Secondly, we had the merger, which suddenly, all of a sudden, there's these new brands. And thirdly, for us, we had AADC, the Age Appropriate Design Code. So a change that Google made that just wiped 38% off our traffic. And I think what you find is that when those big things happen, you've just got to be on the spot, first person in the room. Cubed could help with that. And that was the game changer for me, was when Cubed could help with, the merger, we can better homogenise everything we're all doing. Cubed could really help with the pandemic, because actually, now we'll really be able to see, is it worth paying these influencers in lockdown versus before lockdown? So all those sorts of elements. So I think for me, it's opportunism. It's looking for those other factors that Cubed becomes the solution to, or your attribution tool. Other attribution tools do exist, apparently. I just don't believe any of them.
Did you find the people that you started co-opting started off sort of tentative and grew into it as it grew?
I almost set one of the kind of the criteria for selection as seeming like you cared at least a bit. I think so within each of those teams, inherently the teams you pull in from are data teams. There's a strong probability that they're always going to be kind of enthusiastic about this. I'm very lucky that our insights team is led by a super brain statistician. So I mean, he is like miles beyond my understanding in terms of the way that he works these things. So of course he was really enthused by this, had no trouble there. Business intelligence team, who are very sort of task rich and time poor, shall we say, it was definitely harder. But actually what was interesting there is that as we're having these conversations about what's wrong with your model currently, the BI team were the most engaged with that. So actually as the new tool started to surface the problems with the old tool, they started to see Cubed as a way to unpick, better understand, decipher Google Analytics. The happiest day of my project was when the head of data said, Cubed is so much better than GA. That's it, we've landed, we're here.
What's in it for me?
Gentleman in front of you, I think, had a question as well.
Beyond the scope of you doing all this work, how different is the spend now in those channels than it was prior to you starting?
Total spend's exactly the same. The deployment of it is materially different.
Yeah.
Biggest change for us was in our paid search. So we just changed our conversion metric for PPC from a GA last click conversion metric to a Cubed full model conversion metric, and our return on investment went up by 8%. So it was I'll say it's a simple change. It sounds like a simple change, probably easier said than done. But it's those sorts of things. And what that meant then is that actually we were able to really achieve my dream scenario in digital marketing. As a result of that, we managed to get confirmed an uncapped budget. As long as you're hitting that ROI, just keep going. So actually what we found is it really reshaped the mentality of the budget deployment. But then also in other areas, what we found now is there's been a significant redistribution of investment from my affiliate channel over to what we call our paid content team. They tend to be the more sort of advertorial, editorial, upfront payment rather than CPA-based articles. Because what we were finding is we created a metric within Lovehoney, which was the sales to assists ratio. So for every sale that you were getting credited in the last click model, how many transactions did you actually have a positive impact on? And what we were finding is that the affiliates were just sort of snaffling down at the lower funnel. Something like the content, we were finding for every sale that they were getting credited, they had as many as 20 sales that they were involved in and getting nothing for. So for years they've been fighting for these, sort of tens of thousands of pounds investments on huge articles in BuzzFeed, Wirecutter, those sorts of outlets. They just couldn't get the traction. This made the difference. What's been really interesting to me, now I can't guarantee this will be the case for every business, is that actually we seem to have shifted much more away from a redeployment of the budget we've got mentality for a where can we invest incrementally. So what it's done is, I don't know whether because of this or coincidental to this, we've really sort of stimulated a bit more of a growth mindset. What it's demonstrated is that everything we're doing has value. It's just that some things have got even more value. So it's very difficult to justify taking money out of a positive return PPC to put it into an even more positive return something else. If it's positive, it's positive. So if you're lucky to be in a company that can afford that upfront investment in the marketing on an ROI basis, actually what it seems to have done is taken us to kind of a next level. Well, marketing spend this year versus last year is up about 25%.
So a smaller company might become more nimble, but although you are more nimble, actually you've become more secure
Yes.
in those investments
Yeah.
because the budget is there.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, I've done this for smaller startups previously, not with Cubed. I wish I'd met them at the time, if I'm honest. But what I've always found there is it was much more of a reinvestment mentality. What it tended to be was, okay, if we had to turn off a channel, what would it be, was the question that I was asked. And the answer that came out is, we shouldn't turn off any of our channels, should we? So why don't we try to maybe dial that down a little bit, and if you did that, where would you put it? So what I found in a smaller business, it tended to be, okay, what's the worst performing stuff? If you took X% out of that, how would you deploy it across all of the others? And that has also worked very well for me.
What about thinking about lifetime value at the attribution stage? Because one problem we face is, I don't know, initiatives or campaigns or focus on actually acquiring a whole new product is switched off because it's deemed non-profitable. But actually, if that's an entry-level product and they'll go on to purchase more,
Yeah.
I'm sure you have entry-level products.
Absolutely, yeah.
cross
Lingerie, for example, is what we consider a Trojan horse to some of our more
Yeah.
elaborate products.
How does that fit in with the model?
So, I mean, the first thing I would say is that working to a full model gives you a materially longer view anyway. Some of the journeys that we're analysing in Cubed, so 90, 120 day journeys, so already you're getting that slightly bigger picture. We are currently working in proof of concept stage to see if we can bring lifetime value into it. We're looking at it from a number of angles, trying to identify those products that we know from our total corporate data tend to be the ones that drive the greatest repeat rate. But what we're also able to do now from the historic cube data that we've got, we can start to see which content, which pages tend to drive the greatest repeat visits. We could start to see which channels tend to bring in the news versus returnings, which okay, you can do in GA as well. So what we try to do is take all of that historic data and effectively build what we've called an adjustment, a multiplier. For the test group, we're going to say, right, these 20 products are our sort of most common entry products for people who subsequently come back. Of the people that buy that, of the new customers that buy that, what percentage come back and what is their value? And that's given us kind of a percentage assumption, if you like, that if we can push this product on a first visit, it will probably translate to this over the course of X period. We made a lifetime value over a 3-year period, although it's worth noting that actually our repeat rate is only about 30%. We churn an awful lot, which is why we're looking at it, of course. It's going the other way. So which are the ones that people buy and never come back to us again? That's equally interesting. At the moment, I can't give you any results for that because it's still very early days. But yeah, I think the challenge we've got is that we can start to get a sense of it. So we'll bid now and we'll start adjusting our activity based on what we perceive the lifetime value to be. But if we're measuring lifetime value over 3 years, it's going to take me 3 years to draw the absolute definitive conclusion. So what we started to try to do is now try and think if we can work out what the steps along the way are. So what does this product look like after 6 months, 1 year, 18, 24 and so on through? What we're hoping is that we'll be able to start getting some milestones. As we hit those milestones, if it makes sense at the 6-month, 12-month and 18-month milestone, well, let's not wait for 3 years to validate that lifetime value seems to be working. Let's just go with it now. But then what we do is the sort of practical things we do with that is things like changing our conversion metrics within PPC. Saying actually, yeah, if you think you're pushing this product, push it X% harder. So yes, it is eminently possible. It ain't easy though.
So you mentioned before about taking back the paid last click versus the cube or model last click, and then saying we're increasing it by 8% of that.
Yeah.
Was that a big culture attacking shift to the paid team that are?
I don't know if I can answer that fairly because I think the business had a bit of a culture shock when I joined in the first place. So I think this has probably all been chalked up to the Simon Boice effect, which is a phrase that I've heard more than once. I absolutely see it could be a culture shock to a business. But I do believe that if you've followed all my tips and tricks, if you've gone through, you've contextualised it, you've explained the ROI, you've given them that understanding, it's kind of hard to repudiate the numbers.
It's about that transparency again, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
The problem with, we're in Adobe now, but the problem with Google is it is a black box.
Oh,
I can't
worst
see inside
kind.
it.
And about to get blacker with GA4 as well.
You've done it, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about being transparent, like you said. If you've got all this data, just show it up front. This is how we worked it. This is the end result. This is the 8%.
And yeah, this is the benefit of celebrating your failures. If along the route you've presented 4 or 5 examples that say, yeah, look, if things don't work, I would tell you. So now that I'm telling you this does work, you know, what's the credibility issue here? So I think genuinely found that, yeah, that my personal credibility went up every time I ballsed it up. I mean, what a result.
Dangerous game.
Yeah, I know, isn't it? See if I'm there in 3 more years.